What is up, everyone? Oops, recording? Yep, there you go. What is up, everyone? I hope you're doing fantastically well today. It is Tuesday, March 2nd, and I'm here with Schwan Humes for episode 259 of the MMA Ratings podcast. Schwan, why don't you let everybody know how you're doing?
You know me, busy, same as usual. Always got something going. Nothing exciting though.
Nothing exciting at all. So, Texas is open as of today. Y'all having house parties and stuff like that yet? What's the first big thing you're gonna go to?
I don't really. It's weird because people ask me if Texas is open, but it's like I don't know that there's been a change in Texas. Like people have been having parties and hanging out at the park and going out for large events. Pretty much. I mean, we already had a basketball season and a football season, and some states didn't even have that yet. They're just starting theirs now, so I can't say I noticed a big change. Still people in restaurants, still people going around. Maybe not as many people, but still a lot of people out. So not gonna change anything for me.
So your microphone is rubbing up against what I guess your fabric of
Sorry.
clothing. So can we fix that?
Yep.
So yeah, we have quite a bit to talk about today. We're going to preview UFC 259, big card this weekend. Talk about Khamzat Chimeav's retirement, unretirement, however that looks, and we're also talking about Canelo Alvarez as he smashes yet another man who steps into the ring with him. But before we do, as always, I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to the show and check us out. You can always catch us at MMAratings.net, which is our flagship, and you can check us out on YouTube at MMA Ratings. Please be sure to like and subscribe, as well as subscribing to us on other podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and Spotify. So let's go ahead and get right into it, Shawan, because we have UFC 259 this weekend with a triple main event. I don't know if we can really call it a triple main event, but there's three big title fights at the top of the card this weekend, with the biggest one being a champion versus champion situation as Israel Adesanya challenges Jan Blachowicz for his light heavyweight title. Now, before we go into the ramifications of this fight, stylistically, Schwan, how do you see this battle going down?
I mean, it's gonna basically be a larger guy trying to corner and impose his will on a smaller, lighter, probably for all intents and purposes, as far as striking goes, more skilled and more athletic fighter. I mean, that's basically the only tone this can take. I don't expect the Adesanya to come and physically dominate. Um, Jan, he hasn't really physically dominated anybody, and I don't mean like landing strikes and rocking people. I mean actually putting his hands on a person and dictating where the fight's going to be, whether it's holding them up against the cage, throwing them all over the cage after defending takedowns, or just taking them down himself. A lot of the pattern of his fights has been fairly similar. Guys try to get physical with him. Guys try to cut the cage off on him. Guys try to get takedowns and walk him down, and he essentially picks them off, gets them frustrated, catches them, and then overwhelms them. And that's probably going to be the pattern this fight faces. Jan's not super athletic. He hits hard for his size, but he's not a dynamic striker, and he's more of an all-around MMA fighter than just a pure striker. So I would think it's going to be another David versus Goliath battle where his plan will be similar to the plans of other guys. I want to physically impose my will on Adesanya, and I want to see if I can overwhelm him with my physicality, my size, and my power.
So do you think that will work? Because you see a lot of commentary right now talking about Adesanya's ability to evade and avoid damage while dishing out his own. Do you think that strategy, if that's what Jan comes into the cage with, will be enough to see him defeat a very well hyped uh, middleweight champion?
Well, the biggest thing is we can say he's good at evading offense, and I've seen that before. But the fact of the matter is, how many guys have really been able to press him? Robert Whitaker tried to. He missed a lot and walked into shots. Yoel Romero was throwing low volume. Anderson Silva landed some, but he was also throwing low volume. Who else did he fight? He fought Paulo Costa, who was also throwing low volume for one reason or another. He hasn't really faced the guy who's trying to actually walk him down and use volume and physicality. The only person he faced who actually tried to do that was Kelvin Gastelum. Lots of guys try to put their size on him and try to get to certain spots, but they weren't really successful in pushing a pace with him, throwing a lot of volume, forcing him to actually actively defend. A lot of guys were just trying to get him in the corner, trying to corner him, trying to cut off the cage, and failing miserably, getting picked off as they attempted to do so.
I would disagree with you on that though, because you mentioned I would disagree with you on that. You mentioned what's his name, Kelvin Gastelum, as someone who fought with that style, which is correct. What about the way I feel like that's how Derek Brunson tried to fight him, and that didn't work as well. And also Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori took him down a couple of times. Brad Tavares did that as well too. They were trying to pressure him and get him to the mat, and it didn't work out for any of them. The only one who actually got him down was Marvin Vettori. He left out of there with a split decision loss. So I think those three fights were the individuals that tried to pressure him, and each one of them kind of found a way to lose.
I think, well, they all try to do it, but the person, like, there's people who had strategic success getting some takedown, kind of stymieing him a little bit strategically, and there's guys who actually had success as far as doing damage and pushing him to his limit. Even Yoel Romero gave him trouble because he was low volume, and Israel couldn't really open up because he was afraid of counters. Anderson Silva had success because Anderson was able to land some shots in between Israel's, and Israel wasn't able to land as clean as he wanted to. The fight didn't get past a certain pace because Israel couldn't quite key in on Anderson the way he wanted to, and Anderson's chin was holding up. The reason I point to Kelvin Gastelum is because Kelvin Gastelum actually, even though he took the worst beating, he was also the guy who had the most success against Israel Adesanya as far as putting shots together, landing strikes, getting him into certain positions and making him work. And Kelvin Gastelum was probably the worst striker on Adesanya's list of fighters he's faced. The difference between him and everybody else is he was able to take the punishment, and he was willing to take the punishment. Robert Whittaker tried to do it, got KO'd. Paulo Costa tried to stay at distance, got KO'd. Yoel Romero wasn't willing to open up, so he lost the decision. Most of those guys, once Adesanya put the power on them or started landing shots clean, they either decelerated in their aggression or they got knocked out. I don't know how good Jan's chin is, but when you move a weight class, usually your power isn't quite as much unless you're just a killer puncher, which I don't think Adesanya is, and I don't think he's got the physicality or size just to bully Jan either. So the only question I have in Jan trying to attack and put volume on him is can Jan handle what's coming back? If his chin can hold it up and mentally his head can stay in the game when he gets clipped, he can put his size to use. He can put his grappling to use. He can really assert himself. But all the other guys you mentioned, they had moments of success, but they weren't ever able to build on it. Tavares just got beat within an inch of his life. After like a round and a half maybe of being frustratingly difficult, he just got beat up. He wasn't able to land anything because every time he took a shot, he took a backward step. Gastelum stood on Adesanya, put his head in his chest, threw as much volume as possible, got his hands on him at every possible turn, and tried to wear him down. Now, the price for attempting that was a huge beating that might have changed his career forever, but that's the price you take when you're facing someone like that. Jan isn't going to stand outside and out-box him and out-jab him and out-slick him. He's not the kind of fighter. He's not quicker on the draw. His best bet is to get his hands on him, kick the legs, kick the body, and essentially try to get into the middle range with Adesanya where his defense isn't quite as strong. You know, the mid-range, boxing range, where if he misses, he can get into a clinch. He can kind of muscle him, lean on him, make him carry the weight, take the power. So I'm not saying Jan isn't skilled, but he's had a problem with athleticism before. All the fights he's had the most trouble with has been with athletic guys. Adesanya is going to be the most athletic guy he's faced yet. So his best bet is to come in, be efficient, be deliberate, take his gas tank, take his legs, lean on him, make him face the weight and the power of your body. Adesanya's game plan is the same as always. Pick your spots. You get him hurt, overwhelm him. Look for shots that don't expose you to return fire and allow you to break your opponent down and then lower the boom on him. His game plan really doesn't change. It's a matter of guy tries to take him down, guy tries to stand with him. But eventually he just aggressively counterpunches people. He frustrates them with a movement. He frustrates them with pressure. Sometimes he pressures them, makes them strike, and then he counters it. Sometimes he lets them pressure and lets them lead, and then he counters it. But either way, he's actively countering guys, breaking them down, and then turning their lights out if they're willing to push the pace. If they're not, he'll just settle in and just beat him up for three to 5 rounds, whichever it takes.
So, final thought on this piece. How do you see the fight ending and when?
I really keep having a feeling that Jan might be able to pull this off. I've never been sold. I've never really been sold on Adesanya's chin. I just never have. I think he's when he can roll with shots, when he can see shots coming, he's fine. I think if you hit him, you can hurt him. I feel Anderson Silva hurt him. I feel that Kelvin Gastelum hurt him. I felt in moments that Robert Whitaker got a few shots off. He wasn't able to get the shots that he wanted, but I feel like he's very vulnerable in that aspect. And I really do feel that if Jan can get his hands on him, it's such a size difference because he hasn't fought a guy as big or as strong as Jan. This is an immediate jump up. There's no time for him to make up the weight or to really adjust to that kind of weight and that pace of light heavyweight. So I want to say that Jan can get to the spots he needs to get to and basically control him, maybe submit him, maybe ground and pound him. But once again, Jan has had tremendous problem with athletic guys. He's always had a hard time with guys who can move, guys who got quick feet, quick hands. It's caused him problems from day one. And as good as he's been technically, and as much growth as he's shown, and intelligence he's shown in how he approaches fights and how he attacks his opponents, he still has a problem early on with guys and getting adjusted to speed. Even against Reyes, he had some moments of awkwardness because Reyes' hand speed, foot speed, and power was a little bit flummoxing into him. Adesanya is not going to make the mistakes that Reyes made. I'm going to say it goes to decision. Maybe a late round stoppage, but it goes to a decision in Adesanya's favor. If I'm just looking at things on paper and what I can actually see from the fights, I just have this feeling that if and when Jan can get him in certain spots, i.e. the boxing range, or get him into positions where he can get takedowns, I feel like there's not as big a margin of error for Adesanya that he had against Derek Brunson, who's not really a grappler. He's a wrestler, but he's not really a great grappler. And I really think the size can be a factor. My only reason I can't pick Jan straight out is he just has so hard a time getting into the position he wants to get into to do the work he's best at doing. And if he can't get into those positions for 5 rounds, then he's just going to get chopped up and eventually chopped down.
So let me ask you this, because I'm going to go first, and you can follow up after me. The question is, who do you think has more to gain from a victory here? And I believe the answer is clearly Jan, because he's coming in as the underdog, and he's fighting against a guy who everybody expects him to steamroll. Everyone expects Adesanya to get the victory here. And I think that if Jan wins, I don't believe it'll vault him into superstardom per se, but it does help him get a little bit more cachet. And I'm trying to think of someone who is a similar situation. Not necessarily with the Ronda Rousey Holly Holm upset, because Holm didn't become a major star after that, but she did get a bump, and we saw a little bit of that when she fought Miesha Tate, even though she lost, in the way she's been positioned and performed since then. So I think that if Jan picks up a victory here, he has more to gain, and he has more to kind of look forward to if he does find a way to get the win. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, Jan's already a national hero. If he won it, then I guess it would really catapult him into a stratosphere where he would really be a name. I mean, he might even start thinking about calling out Jones and possibly moving up to heavyweight. I mean, a win over Adesanya is as hot as anybody can be right now without being a superstar in the sport. So a win over him helps his career on paper as far as the legitimacy of his career, as far as the quality of fighter. And then if they have a rematch, if it's a good fight and he rematches Adesanya, that's another big payday. So that would be great for him in that instance. The real winner, the guy who would really benefit the most, would be Adesanya, because just because Jan beats Adesanya doesn't mean that Jan takes over the popularity of Adesanya. It's like when Amanda Nunes beat Ronda Rousey. She beat her, but she's still not as big a star as Ronda Rousey. She's never going to be as big a star. She beat Cyborg, but to be fair, I don't know that she's still a bigger star than Cyborg. With 2 titles, I don't know that she's a bigger star than Cyborg. It doesn't work automatically that you beat a guy and you get his fame. All it does is increase the platform you have for you to build your brand and bring in new fans. So beating a popular person isn't enough. You have to have done the work prior to and after to really build on that. Dustin Poirier's used it as an example against Conor. He's used it to expand his brand, but he's already been building his brand. Nate Diaz was a perfect guy. He beat Conor McGregor, and it took him from star to superstar to like a mainstream superstar. I don't think it does that for Jan, not in the U.S. For Adesanya, it does, and it sets up more trash talk between him and Jones, and puts more pressure on Jones to win his title fight or do whatever he's going to do at heavyweight, because now Adesanya has beaten the man at light heavyweight, and we're one step closer to getting that fight of Adesanya versus Jones. So if it's talking about worldwide appeal, the biggest paydays, the biggest visibility, even though Adesanya is already a star, Adesanya benefits the most from this, more so than Jan. Jan gets, like you said, he get a bump, he'll get some more awareness, but he's never going to break through and become that guy. Adesanya has a chance to become the face of mixed martial arts with this kind of win, given how hot he's been at middleweight, and the win over Jan, who's a very experienced and decorated light heavyweight. He has a chance to become the face of the UFC, the face of the sport right now.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely is in a position to become the face of the sport because there isn't really anyone that is as compelling as him by a long shot. I mean, I can't even think of anyone that they could put in that position.
Not as compelling. And then you look at the rankings of the guy he's beaten the last 2 years. Who else has fought that kind of schedule?
Davison Figueiredo, but that's not even. Yeah. But that's not even like as it may not. I don't want to say it's as deep as a resume, but and Figueiredo is a compelling individual, but he just isn't given the same space to be who he is yet.
He hasn't beat as many high profile. I mean, Robert Whittaker's not a big star, but he's had multiple fight of the years. Anderson Silva is one of the biggest stars. Adesanya got to fight him. Obviously, Robert Whittaker. Yoel Romero, even though he's not a huge star, is a cult figure in MMA. A lot of people like him. A lot of people support him. He had a lot of high profile fights, and yet he's getting another high profile fight. But I just mean in the instance of from the time he's gone to UFC, he's never taken a step backward as far as the level of opponent and the quality of opponent since he's faced. Every time he's fought, it's gone up dramatically. There's been no step. There's been no lesser opponent because all he's done is won. So if you look at his record from the time he's got here to the top now, it's just gotten better and better and better and better and better and better. So now he's taking on another challenge. It's like there's very few fighters who can even look at his resume and the ascension of it and say, oh, I'm on Israel Adesanya's level. I'm not saying he's beating the best guys in the world, but as far as the rankings and where these guys are placed in the middleweight division or in MMA, it's going to be hard to find somebody who's had a tougher go and been more dominant in it. Poirier's lost in this time. Almost everybody's lost in this time except for Khabib. Everybody except for Khabib has lost in this time that Adesanya has been the UFC. Adesanya he's better and better competition and been more and more impressive in dispatching them each and every time.
We really forget about that run he went on first to get to the title, because dude was fighting, it seemed like almost every 2 months or something like that. So he was definitely on a streak to get there. I want to move to the co-main event, and this is where I'm picking an upset, Schwan. I am picking Megan Anderson to beat Amanda Nunes, and not because there's something special about Anderson per se. I think she has the skills to do it. But I'm wondering what state Nunes is in coming into the cage. She is coming off an injury. She was gone for a little bit of time, and she is coming in, as a new mom, and she's been bouncing back and forth between weight classes. I am thinking that maybe Anderson might be able to sneak away and pull something out here, and maybe take away the title from TJ Dillashaw for having the biggest upset in the UFC history. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's very viable. I've had people ask me about that fight a lot on Twitter, in person, people connected to the fight. And I've told everybody I see avenues for Megan Anderson winning this fight. Not because I don't think she's a dynamic athlete. Clearly, she's not a particularly elite grappler. I mean, she's not even really an elite striker or an elite fighter or elite wrestler at anything. She's decent to pretty good at everything. But what allows her some freedom is that she's very well conditioned. She's very big. She's big for the weight class. Like, she can't make 35. She might even be big enough to fight at PFL at 155. She's very long. She's very big. Physically, she's strong. She throws a lot of volume, and she seems to be fairly durable. I don't know that she's durable against somebody who hits like Nunes, but she seemed to be fairly durable. I've never really seen her rocked or stumbled or just hurt and close to being finished. And Nunes, for as impressive as she's been the past couple of years, you have to admit, when you saw her against Randami, and I know Megan Anderson's a better grappler than Randami, maybe not a better striker, but a better grappler, against a smaller woman, because Nunes is bigger than Randami, she had problems finishing. I mean, she almost got stuck in a triangle. Everybody could say that wasn't really that close. It was that close. It was close. She almost got that. She had a hard time controlling her on the ground. She had a hard time keeping her on the ground. That's why when they got into these other rounds, she was working so hard, not able to get a finish. That second round, she was gassed, and Randami's just lighting her up left and right. And the same thing when she fought Felicia Spencer. Now, Felicia Spencer wasn't able to do any real harm. She landed some shots, but she didn't do any harm. But that fight, the shots that Felicia Spencer was taking, people would have thought you couldn't make it out of a round with Nunes because Nunes kills everybody at bantamweight, and at featherweight she wasn't killing her. I mean, she eventually knocked her out, but she did it. She did it like what? I think it was late in the fourth round, late in the fifth round, maybe early in the fifth round or something. Either way, she did the same thing that Chris Cyborg, because people were saying Chris Cyborg doesn't hit as hard as she used to hit. Through 3 rounds, the damage that Nunes did to Spencer and the damage that Cyborg did to Spencer was comparable. So her power doesn't carry as much weight at 45, seemingly, as it did before. So if she can't just walk through Anderson on the feet, that causes the problem. If she has to fight for positions, like fight her up against the cage and grind to fight her in the cage, or fight to get her down in positions, or fight to keep her down in positions, Amanda Nunes will get tired. People keep telling me her gas issue's been fixed. It hasn't been fixed. She's just dominated people. And when you dominate people, it's easy to control position. It's easy to save your energy because they're so scared they won't fire. They can't take you down. They can't do anything. So you get to cruise through it. But every time she's been forced to fight, she has gotten tired. She has looked suspect against Kat Zingano, against Valentina Shevchenko. Even as late as Germaine Durandamy, you saw her huffing and puffing. You saw her tired because she couldn't just physically dominate any and every position in the fight. If she can't get clean takedowns and immediately do harm, if she can't finish on the ground immediately, if the fight's even close to being 50-50 on the feet, she might really have a problem. The main thing you have to do against Nunes is avoid the finishing spots and force her to work. If you force her to work at a high pace and make her work for everything from the word go, and you make her really, really work hard, then about 2 minutes, a minute into the second round, she's going to get tired. She's going to gas, and you are going to have moments and an opportunity to overwhelm her. It's happened throughout her history of her career. The only reason we haven't noticed it now is because nobody's been able to last long enough to push a pace on her. And the first time she got a pace pushed on her by a girl who can't grapple at all, she got tired. She was defensive on the feet. She was lunging for takedowns. When she missed them, she wouldn't get back up. And when she started getting hit, she was flinching away and backing up. So there's a very logical avenue for success for Megan Anderson. If she gets tired and Megan Anderson takes her down, I think she's going to have a hell of a time getting off her back. She's not great off her back. She's not a great submission person off her back. And when she's tired and she can't control pace with her explosiveness and the variety of shots she throws, she's not great defensively. Her defense is your fear of her counter. Once you don't fear her counters, her defense on the feet isn't spectacular. So you have somebody who's not great off their back, isn't great in scrambles because she can't maintain them, and isn't great defensively if she can't seriously hurt you or knock you out and you fold immediately. So even though it'd be tough for Megan to make it through, if she can avoid those spots and keep making her work, there's a very likely second round, Nunes gasses, and now the fight's up. It's 50-50 fight from that point on.
Interesting that you brought it up that way. So I am of the ilk, though, that in order for Anderson to win, she has to stop Nunes. If this fight goes 5, I expect Nunes to win probably 3 to 4 rounds. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would think so. I think she pretty much, I mean, the beating she'd have to lay on her for them to, I mean, pretty much if she's laying that much of a beating on her, they'd pretty much have to stop the fight because Nunes, when she's been pushed, really pushed, and Kat Zingano's the only one who's really done it, she usually can't hang on. And against that Valentina Shevchenko fight where she was, dead, I mean, that last round, she was like dead tired, just covering up. She wasn't doing anything. Shevchenko was just laying the lumber on her, and Shevchenko wasn't even a natural bantamweight then. So I would agree she probably has to stop her. But if she gets tired, submission will be there, ground and pound will be there. Nunes is very devastating in spots. But if you notice, much like Anthony Smith and Anthony Johnson and other people who fight in spots, she's not devastating every minute of every round. She just can't. Like Max Holloway puts volume in, breaks you down. Dustin Poirier is constantly pressuring, landing big shots, breaks you down. Justin Gaethje landing big shots constantly, breaks you down. She fights in spots. And when she has these huge moments of offense, she's grading them, and then she rests. relying on the fact that her damage and her control and the threat of what she can do allows her to navigate those spots where somebody won't try anything because they don't want to eat that one big shot from her, that one big knee from her. People are so hesitant of her power and her physicality. If she gets tired, Anderson's very, very big. Anderson looks huge. I don't know that she can get her off. And I've told people associated with Nunes' camp, I'm like, if she can't get a takedown right off, don't fight for her. Don't waste that energy against somebody that big and that strong, because you lose position and she ends up on top. That's a problem. That's a bunch of energy that Amanda's not expecting to use. If she can't control her on the ground, you need to reset and get back to the feet. You don't need to waste any excess energy if you can't get the finish the way you want it. Because when you, even against the Holly Holm fight, Holly Holm had problems keeping Anderson off her. She had to wrestle her. I knew that was going to happen. She had to wrestle her. And Megan Anderson knows that people are going to attack her grappling first and foremost. She has to know that. If she hasn't been doing overdrive the past 2 or 3 years, then she's nuts. So if Nunes cannot get clean, quick takedowns, and Nunes cannot overwhelm her on the feet, now we have a real fight. Nunes is going to have to work because Anderson wants to put pressure on you. She wants to get you off the fence. She wants to break you down to the body. She wants to land that little cross she lands, that real savage cross she lands, and to overwhelm you. And I don't know that Nunes has the defensive tools and defensive skills to survive if she's tired, if her power is not working, and if the opponent she's facing isn't fearful of her. And after that fight against Spencer, she put a beating on Spencer. But I know a lot of people who saw that fight and said, well, maybe Nunes' power isn't what we thought it was. Because Felicia Spencer isn't a great fighter. She's not known for her world-class chin. It went from questioning Chris Cyborg's power. Now people are questioning Amanda Nunes' power because she landed power shots from round 1 all the way to round 4 or 5, and it took her that long, completely dominating a fight to finish. So either Spencer is out of this world tough, or Nunes' power doesn't carry over at 45. And if it doesn't, then Megan Anderson has a very, very live chance of winning this fight. Same reason I said Julia Pena would give her trouble at bantamweight, because they fight in every position. They don't concede anything. And fighters like Nunes who fight in spots, they depend on those spots to dictate and control the pace of the fight. Once they can't control the pace of the fight, it's 50-50. And I think it's a good pick by you. I think it's a pick that you can back up just watching film. All she has to do is be able to get through the first 30 seconds and not get knocked out and submitted. She gets through that and pushes the pace. Second round is 50-50. Mute again?
Yep, I sure am. Let's talk about the third title fight.
One more thing, sorry, before we go. I will say I'd have to favor Nunes just because of the caliber she is and some of the gaping holes that Anderson has in her game. But everybody knows what Nunes' game is. If you don't know Nunes' game by now, you're out of the loop. That's the main reason I focus on Anderson, because the story is going to be, can Anderson challenge her? Can Anderson beat her? And to me, it's what happens if Nunes gets tired again. We haven't seen her tired in a long time. And anybody who saw that fight against Durandamy and saw her tired, if you told me you didn't have any doubts about her losing that fight, I think you're lying. Because when she got tired, it was real dicey for a minute. So that's why I focus exclusively on Anderson, because that's going to be the story. And even if Anderson just pushes her, that's going to be the story. We've already seen Nunes. Nunes is kind of old news in that regard. So I wanted to focus on what the real story would be at and where the real analysis would be in. Sorry.
True. There you go. So let's talk about this last title fight, because it's the one that intrigues me the most, because I have no idea how this fight is going to go. Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling is a real puzzle to me, because at times it's like, will the real Aljamain Sterling please stand up? Who are you? And I feel like we get a new facet of him every time he wins, but then we see the fights where he loses, and it's like a gaping hole where he loses. Like, dude, did you not know you needed to fill that? And he's fighting against a champion who is very good in everything that he does. I don't think Petr Yan really even has any holes. I know a lot of people are on Sterling for this fight. I root for everybody black, so I'm rooting for Sterling to come out with a win here. But I think this is not going to go his way. What are your thoughts about this fight?
The biggest thing the way Sterling has to win fights is he has to be able to pressure Jan. That's been the biggest thing with him. He's not, to me, he's athletic, he's long, he fights with volume, but he's not super durable and he's not super physical. When guys have asserted themselves physically, he's been controlled, and so he fought Cody Stamann, and in moments Cody Stamann was able to muscle him. He was not saying he dominated and beat him up and had his way with him, but in spots Stamann was able to control him and control position against what's his name, Brian Caraway. Brian Caraway, he got taken down. He wasn't able to keep the scambles he wanted. He wasn't do the back takes. All the stuff that he's normally known for doing, he wasn't able to. And a lot of it was Brian Caraway's willingness to initiate contact and his physicality. Against Pedro Munoz, it was a good win, but that wasn't a dominating win. That was a fairly competitive, I think it was a split decision win, if I recall correctly. He's just never been a super physical fighter. He's never been a fighter who, in my opinion, has been very durable. His best fights have been when he's able to dictate pace, pressure a guy, back him up, and let his length and his wrestling and his grappling dominate position, dominate the pace of the fight. In his best fight against Corey Sandhagen, that's what happened. Sandhagen didn't back him up. Sandhagen got backed up. He took him down and basically mauled him and finished him. If he can push Peter Yan back, I believe that he can dominate him. He can use his wrestling to wear him down, get him down, and submit him. My problem is I don't know that he can do that. Jan's not a great wrestler, a great grappler. From what I've seen, he seems like he's competent. He seems like he's pretty good. But Jan is a very big, very thick, very physically imposing fighter. Like, he's the way he defends takedown, he shrugs guys off. He throws guys off. And I don't know what Aljamain Sterling's going to do if he can't get that immediate takedown. Because as good as his striking has looked recently, it's still very reliant on the fact that he can overwhelm guys with his volume and his athleticism. And that might work for a period of time with Jan, but every moment he's on the feet with Jan is 100% sure he can take his shot. I don't think me or you is completely sure that Aljamain Sterling can take whatever Jan has to offer on the feet. So it's just a matter if he can push him back or not. I don't know exactly how he does, because I don't think Jan will give up ground with Aljamain's striking. And I think especially in the early stages, I don't know that Aljamain's wrestling is good. I mean, it's good enough to get him down. I don't know with Jan's size and physicality that Jan isn't able to just explode out of spots, get right back up, or reverse positions. Because as you know, at a certain level, size and strength, even in the same division, can play a factor. And I think that's the biggest issue, the physicality and the size and the strength of Peter Yan. I mean, the skill sets are obvious. We all know how that goes. But if he physically imposes himself on Aljamain and he has him backing up and he has him kind of flinching or trying to avoid exchanges, I don't see how Aljamain wins this fight. He's not good enough off his back foot. He's not a good enough striker. He's not a hard enough hitter, in my opinion. And if Aljamain can back him up and has him biting on feints and covering up and not engaging in exchanges, then I believe that Aljamain Sterling will assert himself, impose his will, and finish him. It's just a matter of who's going to impose their will on who. And Aljamain's faced the better opposition, so you'd probably say it was him. But on a consistent basis, he's never been a guy who from round 1 to round 5 has consistently imposed his will, backed guys up, and had his way with guys. I can't think of a fight where he's just against a guy comparable to Peter Yan that he's just dominated. I can't think of one. Maybe you know one.
No, I can't. I'm right there with you. I can't think of any fights where Aljamain has looked like the man who will walk out with the title on Saturday. I mean, I can be wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times before, but we'll see what that looks like after you.
He's got so much star potential, though. Like, you could sense it. Like, if he gets the title, he could really break out. Like, he could really be one of the guys for not just for the division, but for the UFC. Like, he's got personality. He's funny. He's smart. He's got an interesting backstory. He's very relatable. Like, I like the guy. I like how he's improved as a fighter. I like his strategy. I like his team. And if he wins it, it'd probably be better for the division than it would be for if Peter Yan continues to win it, because I think you can market Aljamain. He knows how to talk on the microphone. He just has a lot of things working for him. To me, this is just a really, this is probably the toughest matchup you could have outside of maybe Henry Cejudo for him. A guy who's big enough and strong enough to shrug him off, and who's a busy enough and hard enough striker that he can finish him in a moment's notice.
That's very true. So what else stands out on this card for you? Because this is a very deep card with a lot to look forward to. Is there anything else on this fight card that looks out or that stands out to you?
In passing, I'd like to just some quick hits. I'm interested to see how Thiago Santos comes back. He challenged Jones for the title. He, in many people's eyes, was close to winning, but he's basically been out for what, 2-3 years now. I mean, he hasn't really fought on any big cards.
Is this his first one back, or did he lose one when he came back? I think
he might have lost one.
He did. He lost the Glover Teixeira.
Yeah, so I mean, and a lot of times people were kind of thinking, it's like now he's had the loss. Now you kind of know where your body was at. This will be the second fight. It's been a big gap between the fights. That was in November. This is now what, March? So now he's had time to really acclimate his body. He's had multiple camps. He's been in a fight. He knows what he has, and this is what's going to determine kind of where he's at, and if he moves back forward to being a contender, or he falls all the way back. I could forgive him for the fight against Glover. He wasn't back 100% in my opinion. After coming off that kind of injury, no matter what you say, you could be like, oh, I'm 100%. I know I'm good. I don't know if I believe that after the injuries he suffered. But this fight with the extra time off, to condition and to prepare, I think this fight might be do or die for him as far as where he really stands in the UFC. I'm interested in the Dominic Cruz fight just to see what Dominic has left. He didn't look great in that Henry Cejudo fight. He looked really bad, to be honest. I mean, I expected more from him. I don't know why I expected more from him because his skill set's kind of plateaued. But if he loses this fight, he's pretty much doesn't have any pull at this division. I was really hoping that he'd fight a bigger name in hopes of giving the fans a fight they would like and having an opponent who, if he gets beat by him, will give him a little bit of a safety net. If he loses to Casey Kenny, and Casey Kenny's a tough, gritty fighter, well-conditioned, well-prepared, has moved up and looked good against ascending levels of competition. But if he loses against this guy who's not really known, he's basically going to make this guy's name, and he's going to take a huge step back to his reputation. There's a lot of people who already think that he's past his prime and was never as good as he thought he was, or as he showed in the UFC. A loss to Casey Kenny pretty much cements that and takes him out of the equation on any level. He wins the fight, he's in talks. Dillashaw rematch, maybe Sandhagen, maybe Frank Yeager, whatever. He can keep moving. But he loses this fight, it really could be over for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think both of those guys have a lot to really fight for this weekend. And Joseph Benavidez too. I think you just mentioned him too as well. So these individuals are really kind of fighting for relevance. They have very tough fights. Casey Kenny, Alexander Rakic, and Askar Askarov are not easy outs in any way, shape, or form. So I think it should be interesting for each and every one of them.
I feel bad for Benavidez. I feel bad for
Benavidez too.
He's been the number 2 guy for so long. He's done nothing but class. He's put on fight of the years in WEC and the UFC. He's fought everybody, hung out, dedicated, was loyal, got better every single year, and all it earned him was 2 losses for the title. It just, I feel bad for that dude.
Yeah, he's had more than that. He had 2 to DJ. Yep. He had 2 to DJ, 2 to Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, and then, but I mean, like, just after he beat DJ, everybody kept saying, as soon as DJ's gone, he's the guy.
He never beat DJ.
Yeah, and so when DJ transferred out to 1, everybody's like, Joseph Beaton, he must be the guy. He's the guy. And then he wasn't the guy then either. It was terrible. It was like DJ was Michael Jordan and he was Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, everybody else. Like, he was a fighter who should have been a world champion, was never good enough to beat the guy. And by the time he got his second shot, he wasn't the fighter he used to be. Joseph Benavidez for 3 years ago would have won this title fight that he lost, but we can't go back in time, and it's crazy how DJ completely derailed his career.
Very true there. So let's move on and let's talk about some news from this week, because I want to talk about Hazmat Chimeav and his whole situation. So I'm sure you saw, but yesterday he posted on Instagram and announced that he was retiring because he felt like basically he was scared of what his body was going through. He mentioned coughing up blood and other issues dealing with COVID. And I'm going to kind of walk through the whole situation because he's had a very hard time getting over COVID-19. And then Dana White is asked, I think John Morgan of MMA Junkie got a statement from Dana White about Hazmat's retirement. He basically said that it's not true, that Hazmat is scared and that he shouldn't have been training, but they're trying to get him help, whatever, he'll be back, and they're still trying to have him fight in June. Then shit went really left when Kadyrov, who is a legit dictator who has committed all types of human rights atrocities. He even had a comment about Hazmat retiring and made it clear that that is not happening and that he expects Chimeav to continue fighting. This, as I tweeted earlier today, there's a saying of where there's smoke, there's fire, and this joint is smoking like a hookah lounge because to see Hazmat post that he did, and this guy is someone who has been probably one of the most vocal shit talkers since he stepped into the UFC, saying whatever he wanted to say about anyone and everyone. To see him post that in what had to be a very frightening moment was jarring. But then to see the two responses after that was really disheartening to me. And I was texting someone about it last night, and it just didn't seem. I don't want to say it didn't seem real, but when Chimeav's post first went out, I kind of just rolled my eyes because for a couple of reasons. A, because I don't think the MMA community has taken COVID-19 seriously at all. There's one part of that. Two, we've seen Chimeav in multiple videos and multiple appearances not wearing masks even after his COVID-19 diagnosis. So there's that too as well. And Dana White's and Kadyrov's comments are clearly they don't give a fuck about this dude. They are focused on money first, and Dana's space where Kadyrov is still very welcomed in MMA and welcome within the UFC is so problematic for a number of reasons. So problematic. But there's nothing that they can do about it at this point. Absolutely nothing. Because if they want to keep dealing with fighters from that area, they're going to be dealing with Kadyrov as well too. So what did you make of this, Schwan? What taste did this leave in your mouth after you saw everything go down yesterday?
Well, a lot of people aren't going to feel bad for Chimeav because of the guy he's connected to, which is considered more of a dictator or whatever. So people are going to be like, that's what you get. Like, I have no sympathy for you. You signed on for, you're going to deal with the consequences of it. And to a certain degree, I almost fall in that camp because a lot of people have said you don't want to deal with it. A lot of people outside of that area have said you don't want to deal with that person. You don't want to deal with him. He's not a good guy. He's a terrible person. And people on his payroll, fighters on his payroll, have always told you that's not the case, or they just avoided the topic altogether. But the fact of the matter is, Chimeav took the money. He took the benefits of being associated with that guy, if I'm correct. So he can't complain now that guy is expecting him to do his job. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying he should have to do it, because if he's really ill and he's experiencing these symptoms, then he shouldn't be fighting, especially if he's mentally is checking out to the point where he doesn't want to fight or thinks he doesn't want to fight. He shouldn't be fighting. But the fact of the matter is, when you sign on under someone, period, you're subject to their law. Their word is law. He took the money, so now he has to kind of deal with the consequences of that, which means he might have to continue fighting. I mean, that guy, for what I'm understanding, funds his lifestyle, funded his training. He reaped the benefits of being associated with that guy, if I'm not incorrect. That doesn't just disappear because you decide you don't want to do it anymore. It's like being a rapper who's funded by a drug dealer, and you decide, well, my heart's not into rap music anymore. I know it's slightly different, but it's the same general gist. I paid my money. You're not done until I get my money back. And then even then, I'm going to decide what my money back equates. So unfortunately, he set the table for this by dealing with this guy to get into the sport and get these opportunities. He got fast-tracked. He got extra retention. He got the full support of the UFC, Dana White, blah, 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 whatever. And he got to be a name. He got to be a star without having really beaten anybody. But this is the downside of it. That guy wants to be the one making the calls and making the decision. You don't just get to call in and say, I'm not doing this anymore. You don't have that option. And as cruel as that might sound, that seems to be what the actual issue is. If once again, and I may be misunderstanding it, but that's what it actually seems the issue is. That guy's the boss. He doesn't want the guy to stop unless he gives a say so, and he's not giving it. He's saying you have to continue fighting. When I heard Dana say that the guy was still in the mix, or he was still going to keep things open, I figured that Chimeav's sponsor, supporter, financer, whatever, hadn't given him the word. And I was wondering when I saw the post if he had run this by the people who had been funding him and basically put him in this position. When you get in that kind of position, you don't get to make your own terms. You don't get to walk away from anything. Not from those groups of people, not people in those kind of positions. So unfortunately, even though I feel bad for him because COVID is a real thing and he seems to be catching the very bad end of it, when you sign on with certain people or you sign on for certain things, you don't just get to walk away. And from what I understand, that's not the kind of guy you get to walk away from.
Something bad is going to have to happen for them to separate themselves from Kadyrov, and I don't have the faith in Dana White or the MMA community to do so, and that's really unfortunate because we're seeing this young guy basically be forced into continuing to fight when he may not want to, and this whole situation is just really problematic to watch, and it's unfortunate to really see it unfold. I wish the best for him. I hope he's okay. But this is the matter that we're in right now.
You're looking at outside of him as a human being. It's like there's a reason. I mean, you know how it works. There's a reason why people say not to do business with certain people, not to get in bed with certain people. The opportunities are going to come, but those opportunities don't come without what do you call it? Expectations or whatever. And I, like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I assume this guy financed his whole career. And if this guy runs things, dictator, whatever he is, that means he has a lot of pull. That means that whoever's underneath him gets perks, gets benefits, their family gets taken care of, and they just have to co-sign on with him and do what he asks them to do. I mean, and I don't mean this to be insensitive. How did they think that this was not going to happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't just get to make those decisions on your own. It's like joining the mob or something. You don't just get to make those decisions on your own. You don't just walk out when you felt you had enough. You get to walk out when they felt you had enough. And I feel bad for him, but did he not think that? Did he not understand what he was signing up for? Did that not cross his mind?
No, that's all true, and this is where we are now. And it's an unfortunate situation to watch unfold, but it's going to have to be one that we continue to watch unfold, especially as the sport itself and the community around the sport doesn't take not only COVID-19 seriously, but doesn't take this situation with Kadyrov seriously as well.
Well, what I think we've always discussed this. MMA guys care about it when it impacts them. When it doesn't, they don't care. Oh, I care about fighter rights. You get your new deal. I don't care about fighter rights. The fighters aren't being represented. They're not getting the opportunities they want. Oh, I got my title shot. To hell with the rest of y'all. It's a pattern we see all the time. It's why they can never get ahead. All the people investing money care about the success and failures of the people investing money. All the people who are fighting only care about their own success. As long as they're winning, they don't care about anybody else. That's why the fighters can't get any traction. And in situations like this, you really don't even have any traction to begin with. So it's never really going to change because guys like their money and they like their perks. And until that changes, they're just going to get people are going to end up in situations like this.
You're 100% right. Let's also talk about our boy Canelo Alvarez because he absolutely steamrolled his mandatory title defense on Saturday. And did you see anything new from him?
Not really. I mean, he didn't really have to. It would have had to go a couple rounds. I mean, Canelo from 2 or 3 years ago would have probably stopped this guy in probably about 5 rounds. The hope was that Joel Diaz was training him, that he'd be able to squeeze a little bit more out of him, have him in condition where he could compete and push past a certain point to maybe test Canelo. That ended up not being the case. Canelo didn't have to show anything new. The guy wasn't physical enough or durable enough or fighting at a high enough pace to force him to have to show another aspect of his skill set. And to be honest, most guys aren't good enough to force Canelo to have to show something new unless he just wants to. Canelo can just go through the motions against most guys and beat him. But a guy against his caliber, he didn't even really have to go through the motions. It was just a mismatch to keep Canelo sharp, keep him paid, and to keep him active so that when he faces a better opponent, his timing's there, his conditioning is there, his punch count is there, and his accuracy is there. This is just going through the motions to help him become a better fighter. It's not a fair fight, or it wasn't really a chance for that other guy to win a title.
Do you think that we're ever going to see him really challenge? Like, what needs to happen for him to get pushed to his limits?
Well, I mean, he's been challenging different ways. Against Kovalev, he was challenged against a bigger, stronger guy with a real good jab who was good on the outside. And it caused him some distress. He lost some rounds because Kovalev was moving in boxing, and he was able to get a late stoppage on a fight that was pretty competitive. He's had tough fights before. The thing about it is he's got a natural feel for boxing, and his coaches are very technical and strategical in the way they have him fighting. They really focus on every area, every aspect of boxing, and he's a boxing junkie. He's like Mayweather in that aspect. He's like light years ahead of guys because most guys get by on toughness. Some guys get by on volume. Some guys get by on power. Very few guys actually get by purely on their actual skill set, their awareness, their IQ, and their actual craft. Canelo is technically light years better than 90% of the people boxing in his division or out of it. He's really like in a class of his own. I can't say he can't be challenged. Caleb Plant could challenge him. Caleb Plant's a good enough boxer with fast hands and fast feet, so he could give him problems. The Charlo is another. He's a big puncher. He's athletic. He throws a lot of punches. He's a good boxer, but his combination of athletic skills and his boxing would pose problems. Who else? David Benavidez is a big, strong, rugged, athletic, powerful guy. He has BJ Saunders, who he's going to fight next, is a mobile, kind of awkward, slick kind of boxer. These guys have the caliber and the skill and the accomplishments to give him to test him. The thing about it is Canelo has so many layers. The same thing that used to cause people issues with Floyd, where I'll just get physical with him. Well, Floyd can be physical. Well, I'll try and throw volume on him. Well, Floyd's very defensively sound. He moves his feet. It's hard to throw volume at him. Well, I feel I can box with him. Floyd is a superb boxer. He can box with him. They're basically guys who can fight at every single range and every single level at every single spot. Now, there's some spots they're better than others. There's things you can do to make them feel uncomfortable. But unlike most people who just have to tough it out or just bite down and swing, guys like Canelo, guys like Floyd have legitimate technical answers to everything you're doing. So I would say guys who've got a little bit more athleticism and have some boxing skills but have some athleticism would cause them trouble. But I don't know that I bet any of those guys beat him. Caleb Plant can cause him trouble. Like I said, fast feet, fast hands, very good boxer, good size. Charlo, explosive puncher, very aggressive, very durable, well conditioned, and has some boxing skills. Benavidez. But once again, I could see where they would give him problems at, but that's only to a certain degree. I feel like there's 2 or 3 levels he can go to that they can't match. So lots of guys can push him. I just don't know how many guys can actually beat him, especially given that he fights so often. He's even in a blowout fight, that helps you stay sharp. That's another camp you go through. So your mind's sharp. You're watching film. Your body's loose. Your body's sharp. Nobody's as active as Canelo. So even if guys could really push him, they're fighting what, every 6 months, every 8 months. He's fighting essentially like every 3.5. It's 3.5 or 4. It's very hard to beat a guy who's constantly sparring, constantly training, and constantly fighting, and a guy who's already, before he even turned 30, has got over 40 fights. It's just very hard to find the chink in his armor. And the only guy who's done it is Floyd Mayweather. And how many of the guys like that are walking around in boxing or any other sport? If you're talking about the overall skill, IQ, physical gifts, and experience level as an amateur and as a pro.
Good stuff, sir. Good stuff. What are some other things? What are you working on this week? What stands out before we close out tonight?
One thing I wanted people to keep an eye on for combat sports fans in general, before I go into what I'm working on, is Teofimo Lopez is trying to get out of his contract with Top Rank. Basically, Top Rank said, we don't have enough money to pay you for your mandatory defense. You want this much money, we're not paying it. If you want to get that kind of money, you need to go somewhere else. Well, another organization was willing to pay him, and they did an open bid for the fight. Top Rank was going to offer like $2 million, $1 million, $2 million. Other people were $2 million, $3 million. Somebody offered $6 million for the fight. So now Teofimo, Triller. So Teofimo is going to get a career high payday, and he's going to be on a very highly rated card, which should improve his Q rating and should contribute to making him more of a star. But now there's talk about Teofimo trying to get out of his contract because he feels that there were emails released that says that Top Rank was trying to hinder his ability to make money on the open market. Like they were trying to talk to other promoters and say, don't pay him top dollar, just pay him this much so that he's forced to deal with us. And if that's true, there's going to be a long legal battle, and more than likely Teofimo Lopez will not be fighting for anywhere from a year to a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So this is very interesting because once again, it's another case where a fighter is pushing back against a promoter. He wants better paydays. He wants better opportunity. He feels they're not doing their job with them. They're not giving him what he deserves. And then you have a promoter looking at the business side saying, yeah, you've accomplished this. Yeah, you've accomplished that. Yeah, you're a star, but you don't make us enough money for us to pay you the money you want. You think you're a big star, but we can't sell a pay-per-view with you. You think you're a big star, but outside of fighting this guy, you can't get the ratings we need to make the money back. And so now it's that constant push and pull between what the fighter thinks are valued, what the promoter thinks are valued, and who's going to win this legal battle. The difference with the promotional company is they can go 3 or 4 years and be in court. This doesn't affect their career. They can keep still doing business. As a fighter, 3 or 4 years on the sideline can really hurt your earning potential and hurt your pockets because you got to pay for these lawyers. So it's a very important situation, and it's a very interesting story to see. Some people are saying compared to Floyd and Canelo, but Floyd had already won multiple titles. He was kind of a star on his own. Canelo was already a huge star when he pulled this. Teofimo hasn't beaten as many guys as Floyd has. He's not as known, and he's not as known as Saul Canelo. So I don't know that he has the leverage or the money to get out of the contract the way he wants to. And you hate to see a guy who's considered one of the potential young faces of the sport essentially be sidelined for a 2 to 3 year period. It happened to Mikey Garcia. He was out of boxing for like 2 years. And it can very well happen to Teofimo Lopez. And this is his prime right now. This is when he's as hot as he's going to be. And after this fight, we might not be seeing him for a while, depending on how the legal battle goes moving forward. And it's something you will be hearing about more often.
Let me ask you about Triller. I don't think we got a chance to talk about that when that fight got announced. They bid $6 million for that fight, as you just mentioned, and it's looking like Teofimo Lopez will be the co-main event, with some type of celebrity being the main event. How long do you think this model can last? Do you think that they can keep doing this? And are we looking to somewhat of a change in how boxing fights are developed and promoted?
It can last for as long as you can find interesting high-profile matchups. You can't keep getting the older veterans because their bodies aren't going to hold up. That's only going to hold so much. You can only fool the public so many times. It can't be, a bad fight. They're not going to keep on bowling in because these guys are past their prime and declining. And also, you have to find big enough personalities to be involved in it, big enough stars, and then you have to find somebody from a combat sports setting or another star who's equally big enough to draw interest. And there's not as much as it seems like there'd be an endless supply of guys like that. There's really not. I mean, just look at the Jake Paul Ben Askren or Jake Paul. I don't know which one is fighting Askren, but that they didn't want Askren. That's the only guy they could get. They wanted a bigger name because they understand they have to draw on a certain amount of fans to make this viable. And also with these cards, you have to have a certain amount of quality fights around it to justify to kind of dress up the main event, because we know that's not going to be high quality. As long as you can draw guys into it, big guys who have followings and can have huge followings they can bring into it, it'll be fine. But there's not that many guys who have that kind of following who you can really bring into the sport. And the guys who do may not want to risk getting embarrassed. I mean, Nate Robinson had a huge fan base. The biggest fight they talked about after that Tyson Roy Jones fight was Nate Robinson getting knocked out. But how many guys really want to risk that moving forward? How many guys are really willing to take that chance? Combat sports who are stars or even celebrities? Because that follows you. There's difference between getting dunked on and getting knocked out. Getting sacked, throwing an interception, or getting knocked out. So it just depends on how it really comes down to the bottom line is how much money can they offer to make it worth somebody's while. And I don't think it's sustainable. Not long term. Maybe for the next year or two, maybe here or there. But it's nothing they're going to do where they can regularly put out cards like this. This will be like if they go like 1 or 2 big events every year, maybe 3. They could probably drag it out for another 2 or 3 years. But it can't be done with any regularity. It just can't.
So let me ask you this: if they do 3 events a year, 3 big events a year, is that enough for boxing? Because right now we don't get that many from boxing.
It won't be enough for boxing. It won't be enough for them because at some point you have to have a high quality product. these cards are more interest than actual execution. And against boxing, it's just not enough money. I mean, the only reason Teofimo was getting this money is because he's going to be on one of these cards, which is guaranteed to generate a certain amount of interest. That's going to help him. It's not because of him. He's not getting paid because of himself. And he was a guy who was making fun of YouTube fights and these fights. He was making fun of that. That's the only reason he's getting paid. There's no boxing card in and of itself where he would get paid this kind of money to be a co-main event. There's no boxing card in and of itself that he would get paid by himself as a main event to get this much. He doesn't draw enough interest. Now, if you have him as a co-main event to Evander Holyfield come back or Mike Tyson, yeah, that works. But by himself, he doesn't sell. People don't care enough about him to see him fight by himself. If that was the case, then they would have put Lomachenko versus Lopez on pay-per-view. But they know he doesn't sell. So it's not very sustainable. It's like a short-term get-rich. It's like a job you take that pays a lot, but you know your body can't hold up or mentally it'll just drive you insane. So you take the job, you hang out for as long as you can. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months. But after that, you move on and you go on to the job that you want to have or the job that's more stable that you can actually have a career at. That's what this is. I don't think it's sustainable long term. You can't have enough stars because stars, celebrities, whether it's faded athletic stars or actual big name celebrities, YouTubers, they know their value. You're not going to get them for 1 million and 50,000. They're not going to do that. They're like, I have 2.4 million followers. I'm going to need at least $2.4 million to step in and risk that kind of embarrassment. With fighters, MMA, or boxers, you can pay them 20,000 here, 10,000 here. They'll take that. That's a huge payday for most guys. Most guys don't make millions. But for people in the entertainment business or formerly big name stars, you're not getting them for cheap. They know their value. They know their name carries the weight. They know their name is getting other people paid. You're going to have to pay them top value. And there's not enough of those guys out there. There's not enough money around to entice those guys in there to keep doing that past a certain point.
There you go. There you go. Well, Schwan, did you see our boy Bobby Lashley, former Bellator and Strikeforce fighter, win the WWE Championship last night? I hope you did.
I did. He can add that to his resume. He really is. It's been interesting. Everybody thought going into MMA would kind of ruin him, and he really didn't skip a beat. It's really just been onward and upward for him. And competing as a pro actually had the Brock Lesnar effect. It actually legitimizes you as a wrestler. Because
go ahead.
No, it just gives you that legitimacy because you've done both, and so it's really only helped his career. I don't know how many guys can actually pull that off successfully, but it's been pretty amazing seeing him go from a guy who was a name to a guy who's at the peak of his industry right now.
So let me ask you a question then. MMA, pro wrestling, who wins, him or Brock Lesnar in both spaces?
I'd probably say I think I don't know. Brock Lesnar is a really good performer in the cage too, in the ring. To be honest, I mean, he's not just athletic; he's really good a performer. Like I say Lesnar, prime Lesnar. Even maybe now he could probably beat Lesnar. Even then, I'd probably say Lesnar. Now I'd say Lesnar wins in both. Lesnar's from people I've known who've done wrestling and competed or worked in the wrestling industry. They tend to tell me that for a guy who didn't grow up as a pro wrestler, Brock Lesnar is a very good performer. They say if he just did it full time, he probably could have been elite. At one point he was, even with his limited experience. I don't know that Lashley has ever been as good as Brock Lesnar in the cage. No, nowhere near in the cage. Lesnar's be better guys. And I don't think he's ever been as good as him in the ring, to be honest. I'd say it's Lesnar on both ends.
Very good stuff there, sir. So let's go ahead and close this show out. And yeah, I'm done for the day. You're done for the night. We'll be back next week and go from there.
All right, guys. Thank you for the support. Keep on liking, sharing, and subscribing. And we'll keep on producing top-notch content for you.
Have a great night, everyone.